plans to review its handling of the outbreak of COVID-19 in the meat processing industry over the past year, with a view to improving preventative measures in the future?
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Smith. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in addition to its statutory role in meat plants in relation to food safety, animal welfare and health, the Department is providing any support required as well to the HSE and to the Health and Safety Authority at local and national level. The Department also continues to work closely with the relevant health authorities who are responsible for the public health decisions made in relation to the meat sector. If the public health authorities decided to review the experience of outbreaks in the sector as suggested by the Deputy, the Department would certainly participate in such a review. It is important to note, Deputy Smith, that the public health advice for meat processing plants has evolved since the start of the pandemic, as the understanding of the risk factors has increased. Meat plants, particularly boning halls, can be noisy and humid workplaces, and for food safety reasons, the temperature is kept low through the recirculation of chilled air. The experience internationally has been that because of these factors, the COVID-19 virus can be transmitted relatively easily between workers in meat plants. To address these risk factors, detailed sector-specific public health guidelines were issued to meat processing plants early last summer, and implementation of these continue to be monitored. As of the 14th of May 2021, the Department had completed 895 inspections, including unannounced inspections on behalf of the Health and Safety Authority in Department-approved premises. These inspections are ongoing, and this is in addition to the inspections carried out by the Health and Safety Authority itself, and in addition to the 49 premises where the Department has a permanent presence. The Department has also supported the HSE as required in the context of local outbreak teams. The Department continues, Deputy, to participate in a standing committee established last August to oversee a programme of PCR serial testing of workers at larger meat plants. And each cycle of PCR testing consists of a 4-week cycle. The first started on the 14th of September last, and a further 8 cycles have been completed.
Minister, the rest can be read into the record.
Tests carried out, and a positivity rate overall of 0.77%.
Deputy Smith.
And the 9th cycle is currently underway.
Minister, I just would like to put it on the record that there's major problems exposed in the meat processing industry by the COVID crisis, and under the watch of your department there were a total of 108 outbreaks with over 3,000 cases in meat factories themselves. 50 workers were hospitalised and 12 required intensive care unit care. SIP to the union estimate that 1 in 4 meat workers got COVID, and that in turn seeded thousands of cases in the community. And I think that was evidenced by the high level of community transmission in counties and regions where there were numerous meat plants. Counties like Monaghan, Laois, Kildare, where we saw a spike in the level of what they called community transmission. But of course, one has to ask, how does it get in to the community at that high level? And the workers are not to blame. The conditions in which they work and live are the problem. And I'm asking you again, would you call for an investigation into the COVID
Minister
crisis inside the meat plants?
Minister to respond.
Thanks, Deputy Murphy, Smith. As I said, there is it's a high-risk environment, meat plants, because of the nature, particularly the boning halls, and the recirculation of air, and the fact the air has to stay chilled. And we've seen that nationally, and we've also seen that internationally over the last period of time throughout the pandemic. And that's why we have taken a very particular approach in the meat sector, unlike any other sector. And the meat sector, for example, is the only sector where the PCR serial testing has been undertaken, and that's because of the fact we recognise the particular risks that are there, and we very much value the health and safety of the staff that work in these factories, and that's why at significant cost that has been provided by the HSE, Deputy Smith. As I said, the most recent positivity rate overall in the PCR testing was 0.77%. And the other initiative which I have led with my department, I want to recognise the work of our Chief Inspector
Thank you, Minister.
in laboratories, Donald Salmon, in relation to working with the sector and the HSE in this, as well as the rollout of antigen testing as an additional tool in
We're
meat
over time.
factories,
You'll have a minute to come
which
back.
has been an important additional tool as well.
Thank you, Deputy Brid Smith.
Very happy to hear you acknowledge that it's a high-risk workplace, because when this issue was originally raised here in the Dáil by my colleague Deputy Paul Murphy, he was dismissed by the government and accused of trying to smear the meat plants. For months there were no inspections at the factories whatsoever, and the virus was simply let rip. Then during the summer, when the virus was finally in decline, the government turned a blind eye to the meat plants yet again, cutting back on testing and monitoring. To this day, the vast majority of meat factory workers have no entitlement to sick pay, and many live in overcrowded accommodation provided by their employers, under which they are a tinderbox for viruses. Those in this so-called tied accommodation are even denied basic tenants' rights and access to the RTB. There are systemic problems which need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed before another variant or another break out of the virus happens. You've tiptoed around the meat factories, refusing to tackle what was happening in the plants. Your department have consistently overlooked what was going on, and serious questions have to be raised with the relationship between the department and the beef
Minister
barons.
to respond.
Thank you, Deputy Smith. No, there's been no tiptoeing whatsoever, Deputy Smith. And I know politically that is like what yourself and many on the left would always like to portray. But the reality is very, very different. And there has been a recognition at all times of the particular challenges in meat factories. There also, as you know, it was, as with all in the food sector, designated as an essential work and essential service right throughout the pandemic. And that brought real challenges to all working in the sector in relation to being able to have to continue to keep everybody fed throughout that period. And there was a strong recognition from myself as Minister, from my appointment, and indeed from the government right throughout this, of the importance of supporting the sector in every way we can. That's why we've seen the PCR testing, serial testing meat factories, which hasn't happened anywhere else. And also why, as I say, under the tremendous work led by Donald Salmon within the department, we've led out as well in relation to the introduction of antigen testing and making that available as an additional tool under a very strict protocol, working with the factories. So anything and everything has been done, and I want to commend the work of these staff in terms of actually ensuring that the food supply chain has kept going during this period.
We're moving on. Question 3 in the name of...